Welcome everyone to the November 1 special board meeting, primarily dealing with the 2020 budget. Please rise while Supervisor Thomas leads us in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will read the roll.
Mr. Leggett? Mr. Diamond?
Here.
Mr. McDevitt?
Here.
Ms. Bramer? Here. Mr. Loeb?
Here.
Mr. Driscoll?
Here.
Mrs. Frazier? Mr. Simpson?
Here.
Ms. Hogan? Mr. Dickinson?
Here.
Mr. Merlino?
Here.
Mr. Stroud?
Here.
Mr. Wild?
Here.
Mr. Beatty?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Here.
Mr. Sokol?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Ms. Hyde? Mr. Garrity?
Here.
Chairman Conover?
Here.
Mr. Leggett?
Before I turn the meeting over to our budget officer, I just want to do a shout out to our emergency responders and our highway departments and for the kind of response that we've been getting around the county. There's a lot of towns with a lot of damage, and including some county roads. And
you'll notice our up-county
we even have supervisors that are unable to be here today because of the event. So again, a big shout out to our responders. Thank you. And at this moment, I'd like to turn the meeting over to our budget officer, Mr. Thomas. Frank, it's all yours.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Frank. Good morning, Frank.
It's been a busy morning. It is indeed my privilege again to serve as the Warren County Budget Officer, to be able to prepare and today present to the Board of Supervisors a proposed 2020 county budget. I would like to extend a thank you to Chairman Conover and the board for the opportunity to again serve in this capacity. A special thank you to the budget team, County Administrator Moore, Assistant Administrator Tammy DiLorenzo, Deputy Treasurer Rob Lynch, and Confidential Secretary Christy Miller for your work, attention to detail, guidance, without which preparing this budget would not be possible. Thank you all very much. Our department heads and staff are Warren County's greatest assets. Each year, myself and the budget team have the pleasure of meeting with each department discussing and reviewing their budgets, their needs, and ways to reduce costs if possible. Warren County is very fortunate to have experienced, knowledgeable individuals leading our departments, often performing very challenging jobs. Thank you to each and every one. The total amount of the proposed 2020 budget is just over $161 million. It's $161,009,910. The property tax levy increase is $627,607, or 1.38%. The allowable growth and still remain under the tax cap was 2.79%. So as you can see, we're just about half, or 50%, of our allowable tax growth based on carryover, growth factor, and the 2% inflation set by the Comptroller's Office. This budget keeps the tax rate the same at $3.98 per assessed, per 1,000 assessed value, which is actually a slight, and I say a slight, decrease. This is due in growth to the county's total assessed value in the amount of $157,455,000 in value to a total of $11,379,370,000. The sales tax budgeted for the 2020 budget is at the 2018 actual amount, which is $55,015,895. That's an increase of $2,861,000. That's about $1.4 million to the county. The last update on the sales tax on October 17th. Our proceed, or our money that we've received this year, is up 2.9%, or $1,222,000. Applying that sales tax enabled myself to reduce the amount of appropriated surplus, or general fund balance, used to make the budget work, by $257,000, down to $1 million. This will help increase the fund balance at the end of 2019 and also help in future years. This is an expense. It's easy to increase it, but it's very difficult to decrease it. This proposed budget creates 6 full-time and 2 part-time positions, and it also deletes 6 full-time and 3 part-time positions. Overall, minus 2 grant-funded positions in the Public Defender's Office, there's a decrease of $13,500. There was a larger sheet provided to the Budget Committee, and if you go through all of the changes, additions, and deletions there, that sheet, by my calculations, and I could have missed something, was a decrease of $5,000. So it was basically a wash. Three positions were created as a result of bail and discovery reform enacted by the New York State Legislature. Regardless whether the reforms are good or bad, and everyone has their opinion, and time will tell if they're good or bad, and the consequences will be with the New York State Legislature. But to enact these reforms, these justice reforms to the justice system through the state budget process without debate or input to changes is wrong, and this practice, in my opinion, needs to stop. Decisions to make these type of changes need to be debated. There should be hearings, input from the district attorneys, the sheriffs, the public defenders, and victims of crime. I estimate an additional expense of $300,000 to $400,000 to the Warren County taxpayers just because of these reforms. I've heard the comment that there will be savings from less people in the jail, but without changes to the required staffing by the Corrections Department, the only savings that I see is possibly less food. New York State needs to provide funding for these mandated expenses, similar to as they do for the Public Defender's Office through indigent legal services and probation for Raise the Age. There's also funding in here to retain a crime victims assistant in the DA's office. This is federal funding that was reduced to Warren County as a result of more agencies and entities being allowed to apply for the same amount of funding, which ended up Warren County got less money. So the option was to lay this person off or continue. Taxpayers currently fund to the tune of millions of dollars to have people arrested, enforce the law, prosecute people, house the people in the jail, provide medical service for them, legal representation, and defense. My opinion is $30,000 to retain a crime victims assistant is reasonable at the least. The DSS Commissioner requested a staff development coordinator position. Given the number of employees that work at the Social Services Department, I feel this is a wise decision. I feel it'll help with retention of employees and also reduce time and expense in training new employees. Also included in the 2020 budget, this is for DPW. There's an additional $434,000 for paving with the CHIPS, the Capital Highway Improvement Program funding. It's a total of $3 million. $4.2 million was requested, and that's to keep up with the number of roads we have and keep it on a cycle where they can be replaced. The only thing I can say to that is possibly in the spring there may be extra dollars that could be appropriated as we've done in the past, and maybe not. The county is moving to all contract paving. The cost of rentals for a paver and for rollers or the purchase of that equipment is a large expense, and also forming a paving crew from the existing maintenance crews takes away from maintenance, and there's trouble having consistency of a crew. I mean, it always seems different people each year. There's an increase to the DPW machinery fund for replacements of machinery of about $225,000 over 2019 to $908,000. Also increased the vehicle reserve by $100,000 to $400,000. This is due to requests for the sheriff's office and to meet future years' needs for the fleet. The computer reserve is funded the same at $145,000. Overall, the appropriations requested during the budget meetings for general fund, the road fund, and the machinery fund were reduced by $960,907. The revenues were increased by $163,000. The largest one was the mortgage tax, but there was decreases also. There was a $70,000 decrease in interest due to money being paid to the schools for their taxes. Health insurance costs have decreased by $330,000. This is a result of being self-insured and also increasing the employee's contribution percentage gradually at some point to get to 25%. This is very good compared to double-digit increases for being in a community rated pool. Being experience rated is risky, but we have a healthy reserve to endure a bad year or maybe 2 bad years of excessive expenses. And I think we have the ability to manage our health care a lot more efficiently in a lot better way, and we have more options. There's $1,273,000 in wage and salary increases. A portion of this is for the non-bargaining employees. I have to commend County Administrator Moore for putting together an excellent plan, as was requested, I think last fall or early this spring. He's established a grade system for each position, consulting the HR department and department heads, set base salaries by position title, comparing to other counties, and also consulting the department heads and the HR department. Has developed a grid of step increases for a number of years of employment for raises, and the raises are based on merit through evaluations. These adjustments in 2020, I believe, puts us on a solid footing and a good path forward for future compensation. It's more reasoned and sensible way of compensation compared to past practice, and it's long overdue. And I would like to extend my thank you to the County Administrator, Mr. Moore, for putting the work in on this and developing this plan. There were years after the downturn in 2008 and 9. Some of these employees received no raises. There was a year that everyone got a flat sum. There was 1% pay raises, and then 1.5%, and then 2.5%, and I think it's been 10 years, but I think that these positions are basically back where they would have been had that not happened. And you can also say the same about Cornell Cooperative Extension and the Southern Adirondack Library Association. The last item I have here is reserves and assigned fund balance accounts. There's $330,000 in funding in the 2020 budget for 6 accounts. The 2 larger ones are SUNY. There's $150,000 for operating and capital improvements, and there's $100,000 budgeted for assessments and for capital projects. And that's the capital projects that we've been gathering and hopefully come up with the 5-year plan to address them. And this $100,000 will, I think the intent of this money is to do assessments of projects and move them on to better enable towns or the county to access grant dollars. The remaining $80,000 is in the other 4 accounts. And they are retirement payouts, uninsured losses for property and casualty, deductibles that seem to pop up every year, and county buildings. And county buildings .1, countryside rehabilitation. There's also before the board a proposal to take $650,000 of general fund balance to capitalize each of these accounts. I think this is a modest start. This is by no means, other than maybe SUNY, this by no means is going to fund all the issues that will come along with Countryside. The study showed that's a $3 million project plus. Buildings, $100,000, but it's a start. Future funding and growth of these accounts will be challenging to grow them to where they're really good for the county. I think we can actually do a project, and that's going to rely on the continued growth of sales tax. 5 or 6% a year would do something like that. I don't really see that happening, but maybe. Or raising property taxes, or cutting expense, and that's easier said than done also. Currently, I think we just maintain. We have small property tax increase. We take care of pay raises. We take care of the up and down of health insurance and whatever may come along. But sustained growth for reserves and fund balance accounts will have to come from growth in sales tax. Warren County, I think, remains in very good physical condition. I think this is a good and responsible budget proposal for 2020. We're well under the tax cap. Keeps property taxes at the current rate, and it does start to address future needs. Something that has not always been possible in other years. So I respectfully ask for your consideration and your support for this proposed 2020 budget. Thank you. And we do have a little PowerPoint presentation which will basically recap some of the things I've already said, but that's good. Now, before we do that, is there any questions? Yes, Supervisor McNibb.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. I think you've done an excellent job, and I appreciated the...
Thank you.
Looking at the last page of this document here, again, I ask this question because I don't understand it. We look at tax rates based on proposed budget, and looking at Stony Creek and Johnsburg,
Right.
That number seems to stick out a little bit like a sore thumb. Okay.
Yep.
Stony
Okay.
Creek and Johnsburg, and can I interpret from that the property in Stony Creek and Johnsburg is assessed so low that this number's got to be so much higher to compensate for it? Is that
Correct.
reasonable, or is that not?
Correct. That is correct. We're assessed at 1%. That's our equalization rate.
Okay.
So basically, you move the decimal point 2 places to the left, and that's our tax rate. So if you got a $100,000 house, the assessed value in Stony Creek would be $1,000. That's where we're at.
So is that a better way of doing things?
I wouldn't say it's better or no or worse. It's confusing.
Okay.
There's also a piece, I did a little analysis because I was looking at the same thing last night. Johnsburg's equalization rate went down 0.1% from last year to this year. That always has the effect of, because it's division, it always has the effect of pushing up the value. But the value actually, the assessed value also went down in Johnsburg by almost 0.2%. So the combined effect of those two things actually pushed up the full value by about 5% from where it was last year. So that's another reason why the difference in the rate. But the main reason is what Frank spoke to.
Thank you.
Supervisor Liggett.
In response to that, if you look at $3.98, for all accounts that have that's just 100%.
Right. Supervisor Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the tax rate that you're proposing for this year, considering that there are some years where we cannot raise enough taxes to cover the expenses we have, and considering the DPW wanted considerably more for roads to protect our county assets than we're going to give them, give me some idea why we actually didn't raise the taxes or propose a tax rate to maximize our revenue so we could take care of, say, the roads?
Well, I think the intent is to keep taxes at least steady, if not decrease taxes.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Weil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the full value tax base. It looks like it increased over $150 million. Is that due to a new construction, or is it due to reassessments of some of the towns?
That I couldn't say for sure. I would think a lot of it is new construction, but whether all of it is, you know, there's probably some that's been reassessed. Or yes, Mr. Swan.
Just as a side note, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the equalization rates change within the town because the values go up, and when you take that small change of an equalization rate in a particular town, it will magnify and increase the total full market value of the county. So it is new construction, but I don't believe that there were any reassessments in the county this last year, but it's just because the equalization rates will change. Usually they go down, and when it goes down, like Ryan said, that pushes the full market value up.
Thank you. More to come. I have a feeling.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll run through the PowerPoint. Who's in control?
Tammy's got it.
Tammy? Okay. The 2020 proposed budget continues Warren County's compliance of being below the tax cap. The proposed $161 million budget keeps the county tax rate flat, which increases the levy by 1.4%, or half of the 2.8% increase allowed by the tax cap. And the amount to be raised by tax is $45,357,703. The proposed levy increase means the county tax rate will decrease approximately 1/1000 of a cent to $3.98 and 6 thousandths per 100,000 of assessed value. This means a homeowner with a $200,000 property would pay about 20 cents less per year. This budgeting methodology includes long-term planning and a culture where county departments are consistently looking for ways of cutting costs and increasing revenues through efficiency measures that still allow for the quality of services. This budget allows the county to make appropriations that are important to the board, such as maintaining county road funding, a continued replacement plan for vehicles and funding the computer reserve, raises for non-union employees. It created 6 full-time positions and 2 part-time positions. It also deleted 6 full-time positions and 3 part-time positions. Some of the reserves created is one's for SUNY Adirondack. This is operating and capital expense. This is to get the county's contribution higher. I don't think we'll get to our commitment, but it needs to be higher. I think the college is is going in a good direction, and I think we need to encourage that direction continues. Also, an attempt to get at the countryside rehabilitation, try to maximize our 48-bed space at that facility and upgrade the rooms so they're more modern and more inviting. And also to do some assessments on the capital improvement plan. And again, to enable applying for grants or help in the process of applying for grants. This is the budgeted revenue and appropriations. This shows the increase in the full value tax base, and as you can see, it's up about $157 million to over $11 billion. Significant revenues for the general fund. Sales tax collections in 2018 was approximately a little over $55 million. State aid, we received $16,400,000. Federal aid, $10,500,000. Income from the departments, $11,300,000, and other income, $12,400,000. And significant items driving revenue projections. Increase in the sales tax of $2,861,000. Increase in state aid of $631,000. There was a decrease in federal aid of $676,700, and an increase in budgeting mortgage tax of $200,000. This shows the revenue details, and also for 2019 shows an estimate of where we estimate that the sales tax will hopefully land, and that's $56,391,000. This shows the mortgage tax. Significant costs. Wages, $1,273,000. There was a decrease in the health insurance of $333,000. The retirement increased by $82,000. Distribution of the sales tax is $880,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Just the mortgage tax.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I tried to get your attention. 2016, obviously, we had a significant $2,300,000. That was from that one time
Right.
when I think it was the electric company or whatever failed to
Right.
take their refund or
Yeah, there
whatever.
was $450,000.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Just wanted to verify that.
Sales tax distribution, $880,000. County roads, $1,009,000, and debt service reduction of $49,400. This shows the cost detail of the health insurance. As you can see, it's very nice to see it go down. That's for sure. This is the New York State retirement, which costs the county overall about $5.9 million. Budget officer's recommendations. The use of $2,795,160 in surplus funds, fund balances, as presented. $1 million from the general fund, $510,000 from the road fund surplus, $395,000 from the machinery fund surplus, $590,000 from occupancy tax, and $300,000 from Westmount Legacy reserve. Yes, Mr. Wiles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I have to look at the occupancy tax. This is out of the reserve we have for occupancy tax? Is that where that's coming from? It's our reserve?
I believe so.
So does that mean we need to eventually replace this, or is our reserve higher than what we felt we needed?
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure, we need to replace it. I mean, you know, but that's that was determined what was determined to be spent. So.
Don't spend it, you roll over.
I'm not sure what to make of this, but...
Yes. Yep. Right, for, you're right, retirees' health insurance, mainly. Yep.
So if I can go back to the occupancy tax, is that $590,000 going from the occupancy reserve to the occupancy tax budget line? Or is
Yes.
it just going into the general fund?
No.
Going
No.
to the operating
Okay,
program.
thank you.
It all stays in the occupancy.
Thank you.
We need to continue to look for efficiencies that will cut costs and also provide quality services. We need to continue to look for revenues to offset expenses, keep the property taxes in check, and reduce the use of surplus funds. Continue to plan and fund investments in Warren County's future, including infrastructure, economic development, and workforce development. We need to continue advocating for our constituents, county taxpayers, and the state capital. Try to get them to fund some of their programs. You know, they want, fine if they want programs, as long as they pay for them. And continue to enhance county departments by adapting new challenges and promoting good management. And that brings us to the tax base for each municipality. Any other questions? Yes, Mr.
John,
Garrett.
the retirement, it went up a little bit.
Yeah,
Do
82,000.
we know why?
It's off of the pension fund estimates that we get from the state.
Okay.
Yeah, we program that in against every employee according to which tier they are, so that's our best estimate of what the actual bill will be.
Because I thought Tier 6 was going to make it stabilized for us.
I think it would have been higher if not for more Tier 6s coming in.
I think you did a great job, Frank. And
Thank
your
you.
whole budget. Good.
Supervisor Brammer.
Thanks. Yep, thanks, did a good job too, Frank. I have my, what I brought to the Budget Committee last time about the additional personnel for implementing some of the capital improvement projects that we're putting aside the $150,000 for. I think that we need a person in there to manage that money, otherwise how's it going to get spent in a wise fashion? Obviously, we all know that there are road improvement projects. We have the $250 million worth of infrastructure projects throughout the county. So in order to move forward in an objective and professional manner, I think we need to have a professional person on staff to be dedicated to focus on that issue. So after talking to Wayne and Kevin and yourself, I think it would be wise for us to put this into the budget, into the personnel table, but not fund it yet since Wayne doesn't have a person lined up and won't have anyone for several months. So I think it would be at least signaling to him that he can go forward with that, and it'll keep this budget neutral if we don't have to find a revenue source for it at this time.
I support Claudia's idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I support that as long as we have a title and description. Yes, Mr. Supervisor Garrett, or Beatty.
Beatty. The retirement, isn't the retirement plan based on a 5-year rolling average on their investments, on their return? That dictates really what the county's portion should be? Because I know they do that with the teacher's retirement. It's based on a 5-year rolling average on how much they get a return on their investment or not. And doesn't that really, for the most part, dictate whether significant increases in the retirement for the county's portion or even a decrease? Is that correct?
It's an actuarial analysis that the state pension fund does on the health of the fund. As to exactly how it's done, I'm not sure. Maybe Rob or Mike knows the answer to that question.
Okay. All right.
We just pay the bill.
Yeah, okay. But probably based on the same formulation that they use for the school districts and so forth. And I know in tough times, the reason why I bring that up, because in tough times, the school district, I was on the school board, went up significantly. The school district's portion of the retirement, and there you go. So it's basically probably on the same formulation. And so I get concerned about that, because all of a sudden, if the economy did go south, or Mr. DiNapoli's investments went south, went bad, it would put a huge bill on the doorsteps of the county and all the school districts and so forth, because obviously they weren't getting the return on on what they thought for the investment. They estimate, I think, a return of approximately 7%, but again, this is a 5-year rolling average they use. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there, that we got to be a little bit concerned. It's nothing we can control, unfortunately, because it's a state formulation on how they do that. But I just want to throw that little possible red flag out there.
Also, if the economy ever did crash and we had a gigantic impact, all counties have the ability to amortize for pensions. I would never recommend that unless we absolutely had to, because once you go down that road, it's hard to come back.
Thank you.
I know that in 2008 and 9, the town of Stony Creek's contribution rate was 6.9%, and then when the economic downturn, it increased to nearly 20%.
That's correct. The school district in Queensbury went to 20%.
And it's currently at a little over 15%. So it's a long 5 years.
Yeah, it is. I know. It goes up faster, doesn't it, Frank? But it doesn't come down as fast.
Supervisor McDevitt.
Just the numbers that kind of stick out at me a little bit, okay, just on the first page of this wider piece of paper. The Public Defender's Office goes from 120,000 to 132,000, a $12,000 plus increase. The First Assistant Public Defender also gets a $13,000 increase. Not a bad increase. The increase is paid out of grant, and grants almost appear to be kind of an easy way of doing business. Okay, it's like money just appears, and no one feels the pinch or the pain. So I think those are pretty healthy increases. I mean, they are what they are but going down to I guess my question would be going down to starting with the Fifth Assistant Public Defender. Those increases are 100% grant funded. Is the Public Defender's Office 100? The ones above that, are they 100% grant funded also, or is the increase only grant funded?
Well, there's several grants that run over several years. My first answer would be that most of them, I believe, are grant funded completely. To say that all of them are, I wouldn't go that far.
There are a couple of positions, attorney positions, that were created in conjunction when the grants were already established, so those positions would be 100%. But before the grants came into existence, which I think was 2012 or 2013, the county was paying full freight. So the idea here is, the reason why these increases are large is because the public defenders are not on the attorney grid this year, and we're putting them on it for next year. And the idea is basically to keep the county's contribution to the salaries flat going forward, and to fund any increases totally off of the grant. So all of this that you see on this page is grant funded.
Thank you.
Supervisor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to back up a little bit on that environmental planning position and let you know I do support that also. We had a presentation at our Adirondack Association of Towns and Villages meeting. It was a small presentation on, it was basically a heads up on the statewide greenhouse gas emissions limits that the governor signed into law this year that basically is going to mandate, and we're going to have to do this here on our campus and with all of our facilities, that we've got to limit our, reduce our emissions by 85% in the year 2050, and there's certain goals all the way along the way, and this is going to be a game changer for the way we rethink things. So I think that environmental planner is going to be very critical to us finding ways to pay for this change.
Yeah. Yeah, we heard similar comments at the local government review board about that legislation. Yep. Supervisor Bramer.
Well, I wanted to respond that Wayne has been looking at ways to redistribute the work, because, as you know, Chris Belden is our Climate Smart coordinator already. So in order to have smart planning with the other things that we want to do, like with our infrastructure, that's why he thinks it's important to add on another planner who would work with Sarah on the 5-year capital plan, getting that underway, also with this feasibility studies money, and some of the other things are, hold on, obviously the first Wilderness Heritage Corridor, they're working on that all the time. The other operations in the planning department, and essentially working on a county-wide plan going forward, updating that. So there's a lot going on in the planning department, and we want to do it professionally. So anyway, what I wanted to say is I did get information from Trish Nenninger about the different positions and the different job descriptions, and I know that some tweaks will need to be made to it, but it looks like the assistant county planner is the right job title to go with for right now.
Okay. Yes, Supervisor Weil.
Thank you, Frank. I'm going to ask you to help me with some history, and the reason why is that there's some kind of phrase that says, you know, those that don't study history are bound to repeat it, and it's related to the economy and what happened in 2008 and 9 and our fund balance. So I believe that it's a common understanding that our economy is cyclical. It's going to go up and down. Our sales tax revenues are going to go up and down. I'm wondering, with the fund balance that we have, and I know it's just about what the controller says we should have, how prepared are we to deal with another 2008 and 2009?
I think that would depend on the duration of it. Is it similar to that? You know, it would be a big hit. I don't think we'd end up borrowing money. I think there's enough there to maintain that, but it would definitely lower it by several million. Yes.
I'd like to comment on that. You know, a lot of us came in new in 2006. I can count the heads here around the table. We all came in and were handed this scenario. I think we have a board now that's a lot more astute to the finances that are going on here. I would hope that if we're still sitting here and we do hit that, we're better prepared. We weren't prepared for that. We were just handed that. I know myself, Gene came in, Matt, you came in, Danny Gerard came in, a bunch of us just came in, we were handed that budget where they had really cleaned out the fund balance. So it was difficult. It was difficult times, but we did recover from it. So, but I do think we're a lot more astute. I believe we're a lot more astute to the spending that's going on here now. I would hope that we would be, if we're here. You know, if we're not here, it'll be handed off to somebody else. But I could tell you it wasn't easy, because I became the budget officer, and all of a sudden here it is.
So there's no such thing as a typical downturn, but I think it's important to recognize that we are in good shape.
Right.
And we have planned for that eventual future. And I think that's very important for people to understand. Thank you.
I do think, though, in the changes we made with just the fund balance, Mike, having a fund balance target, I don't think there was any fund balance target back then. You know, that's been instituted in the last 5 or 6 years. And back then, I don't believe they had if they had one, they didn't adhere to it, that's for sure. So
We are in a lot better position now than we were then. But that's not to say that we did not run into some problems, but we're in a lot better position now than we were.
And 2006 played into the 2008 and 9 downturn also, because the fund balance hadn't recovered by the time the downturn come along. Plus the health insurance was you know, going by double digits every year. It was $1 million increase every year. And doesn't take long. Yes, Supervisor Molino.
Yeah, I have to agree with Kevin, and you know, we're in a lot better shape than we were then. A lot of us didn't know a lot of stuff that was going on, and the fund balance was being drained. We're a lot more knowledgeable today, let's use that word, or the new people even are a lot more knowledgeable. They're answering a lot more questions, and we've come a long way than back then. And you know, we've got a good team in the Treasury Department, and things like this that are coming out, you're seeing everything. So we're prepared, might not be 100% prepared, but we'd be a lot better off now or in the next 5 years if that happens again. That's just my opinion, seeing what all the changes that have been made and all the fund balances being accounted for. We didn't know. We didn't get the Treasury reports like we get today. When you started with a $20 million surplus, and all of a sudden 2 years later it's down to 12 or 10. Nobody was aware of that. So it's a lot different today, running the management with new leadership, county administrator, and different supervisors. So I think we're in a lot better shape, personally.
Yes, Supervisor
Thanks,
Hyman.
Frank. I got a question in the law enforcement budget. It's suggesting in this budget that we eliminate the major's position, the delete the secretary, and the sheriff, which is about $150,000. But also, I'm trying to understand the reasoning and the rationale on the creation of a senior town clerk, lieutenant number 3, and an investigating sergeant. That's probably an increase of about $50,000. Just curious as to why the change in the structure of the department, what the reasoning was from the department head and his request.
Geez, I'm not sure that I can recall. I know the confidential secretary didn't want to stay in the sheriff's department. That was that position. The major, I'm not sure that anybody wanted to be major. I think they wanted to be lieutenants.
Well, they have 2 lieutenants now?
3, I believe.
3?
Well, there's 2 now.
Number 3.
Right, they're deleting the major and they're making that a lieutenant instead, is what they're doing.
we used to have 3.
Right.
And then
You went back to 2 and then
we went to 2.
Okay.
And then I think the major reason why they don't want to do the major's position is not civil service protected.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
And the other investigator, the investigative sergeant. That's the result of assigning a sergeant full-time to the new discovery mandate. So in doing that, we essentially had to backfill an extra sergeant's position. It turned out to be the investigative sergeant.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bramer.
While we're on this table, do you need a motion to add the position?
I'm not sure if that's my bailiwick. I think I present the budget, and then I think the chairman would come back up and...
We have to vote to accept the tentative budget today. We'll vote on the adopted budget in 2 weeks, and we'll have a public hearing on the tentative budget. So in terms of historically when those additions or deletions have been made between tentative and adopted, I'd have to defer to the supervisors that have been here.
Well, I think...
Go ahead.
I think what you're advancing is an organizational, an unfunded position, an organizational change. That can be done at any time. I think we can entertain that at any time. Once you present your budget, I do believe that we could entertain it. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, I would think that we could do it once we reconvene the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, no?
Yeah,
I think once we reconvene the regular meeting, we could ask for the unfunded position to be added in.
right. Before the tentative's adopted.
Before the tentative.
I don't see a reason, though, not to put it into the tentative now, so it's out there for the public, and that's what the
Yeah.
public will be
That's
seeing.
what they're saying.
Right, it will be.
Oh, he has to take the...
So
We have
do
to
you
part.
need a motion?
No, the chairman does.
When he gets back up there, Claudia.
Yes, Supervisor Wild.
Frank, sorry,
I understand.
And I think it's a fine idea.
Thanks.
another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm looking at a handout that we have. It's called Personnel Request 2020 Warren County Budget. And there's a lot of positions that are being created, deleted, created, deleted, created, deleted. It's much more than the net zero I think you mentioned in our presentation.
Right.
I see some are 100% grant funded.
Yep.
But it doesn't seem like the math adds up, and I'm just curious if you could help me just understand all these different additions and deletions and the delta between.
This is
your
the personnel request?
Okay.
Personnel request you're
Yes, that's
talking about?
Yes.
Well, by my calculations, I did go through this and took out the positions that weren't going to be funded, took out the deleted positions, and positions that had been added to, and by my calculations, when I got to the end, there was $240,915 in additional expense, and I came up with $246,410 in reductions. So I netted out to be less by $5,495.
So, but you didn't, and I'm sorry, I've got to ask for clarity, because in your presentation I thought it was like we're adding 3 and deleting 3. It was, I'm not sure what page it was, but it was on the proposed budget of the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation.
Right, right.
Created 6 full-time positions and 2 part-time, deleted 6 and 3. Does that include all of those in here? Because it looks like we created more than 6 and deleted more than 6, but...
The positions that where it was a swap, where it's essentially a title change, or a position, they're losing a position and adding something in lieu of that position. As you said, this is a kind of a net zero. This is new positions, but the rest of them that took one here and put one there are not on that list.
Right.
I can go through every department if that's...
No, I'm just... I have an understanding now.
Okay.
What we're trying to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Supervisor Liggett. Right. I believe the Budget Committee received a copy of, I'm not sure if there's one on the table today or... Yep. That's just what was put before you today. Usually the reductions in appropriations or additions in appropriations that I recommend are available, and also the revenues.
Those were made available, I believe, at the Budget Committee. We do have a separate sheet that looks just like this that has everything else in it. But we'll send that out today.
Not really. Anything else from anyone? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
Nice job, Frank.
Thank you.
We'll get the itemized changes out today to the board.
There's no financial involved.
No.
You know, we're the ones that tell them.
Good job, Frank. Very good job, as usual.
Good job. That Medicaid or just the federal money? I'm not sure.
All right, good. No, I'm going to lose my place. Hmm? Right, right. Just so when we get to resolutions, that would be the time to amend the resolution on the budget, and then we go to the public hearing. That's what goes for the public hearing.
Great, thank you.
All righty. Now we'll have the review of the Warren County Multi-Year Financial Plan. County Administrator.
Do members of the media have a copy of the multi-year report? You do? Okay. We did this last year in August, and by the time we got to the budget, I think all of us, including me, had to refresh our memory as to what was in it. So I figured it would be more appropriate to do it in conjunction with the budget this year. I believe you've had a couple of days to look it over and hopefully have some questions, or maybe not. I just want to go through a couple of points that I already mentioned on the email to the board. And that's, at first glance, it would look like spending has increased dramatically from 2018 to 2019, but that's not the case. The basis of the 2019 projection and all of the out-year projections that are triggered by the 2019 projection is the modified budget. And the modified budget's always larger than the adopted, and it's larger than the actual because it includes all of the expenses and revenues that are added throughout the year. And it's inevitable that by the end of the year, some of the expenses haven't been made and they roll into the following year and become part of the following year's modified budget. So that's why on paper it looks like a massive increase. In reality, it's not. When we balance, when we close the books on 2019, it'll come down from that number. At first glance, it also looks like there's a $1.9 million operating deficit in 2019, but that's not cause for alarm. What that represents is the $1.4 million in fund balance appropriations that the board made earlier this year for things like paving, and then the remaining $500,000 is what's going to be assigned to the Octax Reserve and the Westmount Reserve, so that won't, at the end of the day, come out of the general fund. The 2020 projection also includes what's in the tentative budget that Frank has prepared. Again, I wanted that projection to be a little bit more close to reality. And when you look at that, you would think that it's $1 million off balance, but again, that's not the case. That $1 million represents, back to that slide that Supervisor Wild asked about, that represents the portion that's coming out of the OCTAX reserve and the Westmount reserve. Those costs are all incorporated into the expenses, and at the end of the day, they don't fall to the general fund. You would also think at first glance that the road fund and the machinery fund are running major deficits now and that they're going to make money down the road. Again, that's not the case. There's a page later on in the report that's labeled county road and another one that's labeled road machinery. And the line that's labeled interfund transfers is the actual projection of the deficits that those funds will run. Those funds are always going to run a deficit. They're subsidized by the general fund. And the reason why the expense looks really, really high right now is that it's an assumption that, just for purposes of the forecast, that you spend the entire modified budget and nothing rolls forward into the following year. And against that, the reserves that are in that fund are drawn down against because those funds currently have at least the road fund has a sizable reserve, and that's again it's a function of the modified budget. Then at the end of the year, when we make the adjustments, the interfund adjustments, we make sure that those funds close with a 5% fund balance. So it's just trying to say the number to look at with those funds is on the later pages, the interfund transfers. The major assumptions that are in this forecast are a 1.5% increase every year in the property tax levy, which is about what's in there for 2020. It's 1.4. That's an approximation of the revenue we would bring in if we keep the county tax rate stable. The sales tax is in for 2.5% for 2019. It's currently closer to 3%. So that's, I hope, a conservative projection. And then a 1.5% per year afterwards is what's in there for sales tax. There's $125,000 per year growth in occupancy tax revenue. That's I believe a conservative projection. We typically do about 3% year to year. There's a phase out of railroad expenses. There's a 2.5% salary increase every year for every employee. As you know, CSCA is out of contract as of the end of this year, so that's a speculation as to where they might land. We won't know until the deal is done. There's a 3% increase per year for SUNY. We've been in the practice of doing 2% per year, but we've indicated, at least through the Budget Committee, that we want to increase our contribution to that asset, and it's in there at a 3% increase per year. There's $100,000 per year for a capital infrastructure feasibility studies. There's $4 million a year for paving, which is the ideal number that the DPW department would ask for. It's cut in the 2020 budget down to $3 million, and that's simply because as you can see, the 2019 budget for sales tax is going to be much lower than what we'll receive at the end of the year. So when we find that out, we'll revisit it beginning of 2020 and appropriate additional funds into the paving account, the same as we did this year, as long as the year ends up good the way we think it will. But for purposes of a multi-year forecast, because I'm forecasting what we think the actual sales tax revenues will be rather than the prior year's, the way we do the budget is the prior year's actual receipts. Because we have what we think the actual revenue will be, we're forecasting the entire $4 million of paving expense that we believe we will need. The fund balance that we always refer to, that's line 32, general fund unreserved fund balance. That's really the number that matters in this forecast. The 2019 year-end forecast includes the fund balance amounts that have most recently been requested to be taken out. Those were discussed yesterday at the Finance Committee meeting. So those are factored into the 2019 year end. And it's pretty much the $21 million that Frank ballparked back of the envelope in a couple of meetings ago. So good job, Frank. My final observation on this is, as you can see, we still open up an operating deficit in the out years. That's in line 10, the general fund deficit. And we're drawing down our fund balance, which is in line 32, rather than building it up to meet the GFOA standards. GFOA recommends that you have, you essentially take the general fund appropriated budget and divide it by 12 and multiply it by 2. So you have 2 months of operating. That's what the fund balance ought to be. And what I'm getting to is that the county will need to make some policy decisions on how to close this deficit and build up the fund balance. Doing it by shorting paving and SUNY and capital infrastructure and some of the other pro-growth things that we've put into this budget. You could do that, but whether that's a wise decision or not is a decision for the board to make. The 1.5% property tax increase per year, again, that represents a level county tax rate. You could address the deficit by increasing up to the cap if that's the direction the board wants to go. Or you could find an alternative source of revenue. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Ms. Kramer.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for putting this all together and doing it at budget time. I think that makes a lot more sense for us. I had some time to review this, and I appreciate your narrative that you gave to us so I can understand where, like you said, at first glance it's this, but it's not really that. But given that, are we appropriately forecasting out based on the numbers that you have that are in the 2019 when you're telling me that's not really accurate because, like for instance, the $1.9 million deficit is not taking into consideration $1.4 million that's still going to be brought back in. So our deficit for 2019 is really only looking like $500,000, right? But are we then forecasting on a number that's not really a true reflection of what we're going to see in this year? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. That
and then we just like snowball that problem. That's not. It's a problem. I get that. Mm-hmm. And what you just said about we're never going to have enough money to do all the things that we want, like the $1 million deficit in paving.
Right.
But are we over forecasting the problem?
Oh, well,
and then snowballing it.
I don't think that you're snowballing it. I think it's a one-time adjustment, really. 2019 is going to close, I believe, with a surplus. So it'll be a one-time adjustment for what that surplus is. But then going forward, the methodology of the projection is such that, you know, it's I'm trying to do an apples to apples by using the modified budget going forward. So it's a one-time thing. That the starting number may kick up a little bit, but the operating deficit will still hold true. At the end of the day, the difference between the actuals and the modified, it becomes it's the same proportion of county funds, because when you're not spending, there's expenses in there that are matched on the other side by the revenues. But the expenses, the sales tax, that's an expense on the county side. I'm probably not being clear here, but the expenses that matter are the 100% county expenses, and for the most part, those are accurately projected. I'm sorry if that probably doesn't make any sense.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to get at for a policy standpoint is like this out in 2023, a $2.9 million deficit, and then our fund balance only, going down to 16 million. Is that really what we should be?
That deficit is not calculating down into those rows in the bottom because it's coming out of other funds. So it's not having any bearing on line 32. It shows up in the upper part of with the general fund deficit, the 1.9 million, the $1 million.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a negative effect on the general fund unreserved fund balance because it's applied to other funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not the easiest readout, but it's accurate from an accounting perspective.
Yes, but from a planning perspective, I know that this is good for accounting, but you feel like this is a good...
I do. I do.
From a planning perspective for us too?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. With the caveat that you have a one-time adjustment for 2019 for a surplus that we'll have.
Is that a one-time or one time every year?
It's one time. Yeah. So, like, if we end up, with a $1 million surplus, you're going to essentially adjust the first number, the general fund number, from the $21 million projection up to a $22 million projection.
Okay.
And then all those other projections going out will also, by virtue of that one adjustment, will be $1 million higher.
But the trend is exactly the same.
Correct.
I guess. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
They need to understand the assumptions. I mean, as long as you understand the assumptions, then I think it reads a certain way.
Right. Well, I
But
don't
if you change
understand
the
them all, to be
assumptions,
quite frank, but I'm trying to get
if you
the
change
gist.
the assumptions
Yes.
on expenditure or you change the assumptions on revenue, then of course the numbers change, right?
Yes.
And so it's because the only thing you have for actual, like at this moment in time, is through 2018. You don't even have actual through 19 yet.
Right.
Supervisor Wild.
Thanks. I just wanted to know if we needed to get some polishing compound for our administrator's crystal ball. Right? Is your crystal ball murky, or is it pretty clear?
It's clear to me.
I like it.
All right. Respect.
Yeah. Supervisor Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the fact that they were forecasting out to the year 2023, but I also share the concerns that Kramer's brought up about the deficit, the reduction in fund balance, but I think Ryan, you're suggesting us to get a little more aggressive in trying to find new revenue by this work.
Well, I'm in light of what we're proposing with the 2020 budget, I'm saying those major the policy decisions made in that budget, what will happen if we carry those out.
Because it certainly looks like the general fund unreserved fund balance is going to decline to $16 million in 2023. That's going to land in the deficit of $16 million. So I think your point was we've got to adjust the policy because cutting is not going to fix it.
Right. I'm essentially saying if we want to keep the same priorities going forward, it's going to have to go on the backs of property taxpayers more than we would otherwise like, unless we find an alternative source of revenue.
Supervisor Lowe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to actually tie in this conversation with what Supervisor Wild mentioned earlier about the are we prepared if something, a disaster should happen in the economy? And in the process of the forecast, which is a continuation of what we started 8 years ago, the expenses are pretty easy to forecast. The revenues, we've been very careful in projection of the revenues, not to be over exuberant, to say, oh boy, our sales tax is really high, it's going to still be high. So we see every year that the sales tax comes in, and once again we have a reprieve. But in the forecast, we don't count that great success. Therefore, as each year goes by, we know the expenses are going to go up, the revenues just don't match the expenses, and we start to get into a deficit. As Supervisor Diamond said, where our revenue or our fund balance is down to $16 million. But that's 2023. So the health of the county is that if something bad should happen, we're not going to fall off the edge of the cliff. We'll be down to $16 million. So this forecasting tells us that our financial situation is solid. If for some reason the sales tax doesn't come in, we can make smaller adjustments. We won't have to make drastic adjustments like they had to make in 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Thank you.
I just want to point out there's a difference between the way we budget the sales tax and the way we forecast the sales tax. Our practice is to budget the sales tax for next year at the most recent actual receipt. So the 2020 sales tax budget is the 2018 actual. The 2019 budget is the 2017 actual. But if you look at the page on the forecast that says GF revenue, it's a couple of pages in. You look at the line that says sales and use tax, line 9. Those numbers don't match up. So that my 2019 projection of $56 million does not match the $52 million that's in this year's budget. The 2020 projection of 57 does not match the $55 million that's in the budget. So what I'm saying is that the forecast does incorporate growing sales tax. I forecasted it for 2.5% for this year, and then 1.5% for each additional year. And you could make an argument that you could forecast that more aggressively, but if it doesn't come in, that'll be a problem, and it'll be a deficit that opened up that we didn't plan for.
You mean budget it more aggressively?
No, I mean forecast. I think that was Supervisor Loeb's argument that maybe the 1.5% wasn't as high as it actually might be.
I guess it was, but if we're forecasting with a great confidence that we're going to have tremendous growth, and we're still seeing these negative numbers, then we have a problem without the economy going south. Yeah. And we have a problem right now. Well, something's not right in the forecast. So you're forecasting that if everything goes, we maintain a healthy environment, we're still going to be in trouble.
Right. I'm forecasting for sales tax to continue to increase.
You're forecasting that everything is going to be, our revenues are going to be healthy.
Yes.
And we're in trouble. So, therefore, you don't have to worry about if we're in trouble now. Are we going to come up with a solution? We can't just vote on this and say, okay, this is great. Thanksgiving's coming. You're forecasting that we're actually going to be in trouble.
In the out years, yes.
Out years is 4 years away. That's like nothing. We have to start working on a serious solution right now, not wait 3 or 4 years.
The challenge is, if I might, that the rate of the growth exceeds the rate of the revenue.
Well, that's what I was saying.
You see what happens.
Right.
And so, so what happens is, because you have the actual, so you know, for example, there are things that you know on the expenditure side that you know what your contractual requirements are going to be perhaps years into the future. You know, for example, what it costs you for energy and what your energy, you know these things. And so your rate of your growth on your expenditures is greater than your anticipated or projected revenue growth. And that's what this is reflecting.
That's correct, yeah.
Peter McDivitt, Supervisor McDivitt.
Just one last question, please. The proposed $161 million budget keeps the county tax rate flat, which increases the levy by 1.4%, half the 2.8% increase allowed by the tax cap. If we went to the 2.8%, if we actually went to not half, but went right up against that line there, how much revenue would that produce?
I think it's about $650,000. I have it on one of my papers here. Just got to find it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank
Okay. The treasurer was looking for the floor. Without objection, Mike?
Yeah, as far as these forecasts go, just to give you some history on the forecast, okay? Because I was here when we first started doing these. The first year that we forecast anything, we were down to a unencumbered fund balance of about $8 million, or no, $6 million, okay? And now we're projecting that at $16 million, okay? So what the point I'm trying to make is, because of appropriate budget items and working together, the projections are getting better. They're not getting worse. You understand what I'm trying to say? When we first started doing projections, we were in the hole when we projected out 4 years. So in other words, the first projections for 2020 were that we would end with maybe a $6 million fund balance. We got almost 20 million, okay? So we're making the proper corrections, we, meaning this board, is making the proper corrections as you're going along, and the forecasts are getting better and better every year. So to go back to the question, yes, I think we were in very good shape if something drastic happens to the economy. For a long period of time, no, but nobody's going to be. Short period of time, I think we're in good shape.
Right. Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the very poignant slides that I saw was that we have to continue to have a presence in Albany and fight for some of these mandates and try to get the state to cough up some revenues for us. I think that if we keep on that track, as Mr. Thomas was saying, you can't project that. You can't incorporate that into the budget, but certainly that needs to be a part of our responsibilities as far as looking for those additional revenues to offset a lot of our expenses.
Right, right. And just to, maybe I'll ask Ryan to speak to this because it might help some of you, that you also need to understand that the expenditure line goes to what the mayor was saying, Supervisor Diamond, that our expenditure plan, there are things that are not in that expenditure plan also. Many things that have dollar expenditures associated with them. And just quickly, Ryan, if you could.
This is, it's like a current law projection, if you will. As I said, it takes the policy decisions made in the 2020 budget, which is a very sound budget, and carries them forward. And the problem, as the chairman mentioned, is that when you carry it forward, the revenue doesn't grow as fast as the expenses do. The 2020 budget has begun to make some investments in pro-growth strategies. Those investments are good for now, but they're not where we ultimately ought to be. What's not in this forecast is additional strength in capital planning. We've already discussed the position today that we believe that we need that is not appropriated in this budget. The hoteliers, I've spoken with Mr. Dittrich about the idea of doing, trying to make Warren County a year-round tourist destination, which is a very worthwhile initiative, but we currently don't have funding in there to get that done. Economic development, strategic planning. We talk about diversifying our economy beyond just tourism and needing to create not just more jobs, but quality jobs. We need to figure out what industry clusters we want to recruit to come here and what do we need to do to get them here. That's going to be investments in workforce development. That's going to be investments in infrastructure that these companies need in order to operate. They're not just going to come here because taxes are low and the scenery is nice. We need to. They have resources that they're going to need to locate here, and that's going to require an investment from the county if that's the direction we want to go in. Broadband, the county has a role to play. We're doing it. We don't really have funding associated with that. Housing, the planning department is working on affordable housing, but there's not a whole lot of dedicated funding to that. Encouraging entrepreneurship. SUNY's already doing some of this. We're trying to support SUNY with that initiative and other initiatives. So as I said, the 2020 budget starts to address some of these things, but if the board makes a decision to do more, it's not going to, the funding has to come from somewhere.
And I think this is a discussion, this is a great discussion to have at committee level as well. And I would recommend that I think this is, we should continue this discussion at the committee level because I think that's where we are in the planning process and the 5-year projection is that, you know, what are the real costs associated with our infrastructure? What in terms from a capital planning perspective, and how does that fall over time, and what does that look like if that's incorporated into our expenditure plan? You do that, and that gap gets very large, very, very quickly, beyond what you're seeing in this 5-year projection. But in any event, I would, unless someone needs feels, Supervisor Beatty.
I was just curious, do we have a number of the dollar figure on how many dollars of unfunded mandates are slammed into Warren County from Albany?
I believe we produced that.
We do. We do a truth in taxation, and every county's is different based on what they count and what they don't count. But fair to say, take 85% of the general fund appropriation, and that represents state programs.
They're unfunded, all of them, or?
No. That represents the gross of the state programs, and then take the same amount of our tax levy, and you know, that's what represents the county's portion.
Okay, thanks.
All right, now I'll open up the meeting to any. I'm sorry, Supervisor Loeb.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment. Since it's coming to the end of my tenure, addressing the intimation that Supervisor Beatty made. Unfunded mandates, meaning mandates that are coming down from the federal and state government that we have to pay for. Sorry, we have to pay for them. I'd like to have the federal government and the state government pay for them. But on the other hand, if not for those mandates from the federal and state government over the decades, probably most counties in this state, if not the country, would be living in the 1800s on a lot of respects as far as health and social programs, and it's just so much of what we do. If you left it up to the localities, we would not grow. So those mandates really have a place in the affluence and the just the success of this country. Even though we have to pay for it, they're of value. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now I'll open it up to the floor. Anyone in the audience? I don't believe so. Mr. Dickinson, you don't count at this stage. And with that, we'll move on to resolutions. The chair will entertain a motion regarding... Okay, we need to bring 459 and 460 to the floor. Why don't I have a reading of the resolutions? Do you want to read?
Sure, pretty much it.
Okay.
Proposed resolutions 459 and 60 were emailed to the board and posted to the county website early in the week. Printed copies in your folder. A motion is needed to bring 459 and 460 to the floor.
Supervisor Simpson, Supervisor McGowan on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 459 and 460 have been brought to the floor. The chair will entertain discussion regarding 459. Any discussion on 459? There being no discussion on 459, I'll close discussion on 459. We'll just have a general vote on 459. All those in favor of 459 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The chair will open the discussion regarding Resolution 460. Ms. Bramer?
Yes, again, thank you to Supervisor Thomas. I would like to make a motion to amend the proposed tentative budget to include an assistant county planner that would not be funded at this time.
Include an unfunded position. Supervisor Dickinson on the second. Any discussion regarding the amendment? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we will return to discussion regarding 460. Other discussion regarding 460? There being none, I will ask the clerk to read the roll.
Okay, we're voting on Resolution 460. Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes. Announcements. Any announcements? Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Dickinson, Supervisor Garrity on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Aye.